Okay, hold on. What just happened in federal court is something we've literally never seen before. 29 federal judges, yes, 29, just dropped a ruling so seismic, so cold, so brutally direct that Trump's entire legal strategy didn't just take a hit, it evaporated. And the wild part? He never saw it coming, his lawyers didn't see it coming, even the reporters covering the case didn't expect anything close to this. So let me start with the part nobody is saying out loud yet. This wasn't just a ruling. This was a coordinated judicial uprising. And it hit Trump exactly where he believed he was untouchable. Now, imagine this. Trump walks into court expecting the same routine: delay, deflect, stall, ask for extensions, file another procedural motion meant to drag the case out for months. The usual playbook, the one he's used for years. But instead of giving him an inch, the judges hit him with a united decision that basically says, we're done with this. And here's where it gets even crazier. They didn't simply reverse a previous ruling. They ordered full transparency, forced evidence disclosure, slapped down delay tactics, and dismantled every loophole his lawyers were trying to hide behind. The entire scaffolding of his defense collapsed in one morning.
Okay, hold on. Because if you think that's the shocking part, no. The real twist is what happened inside Trump's legal team the moment the ruling dropped. You could literally see the panic ripple across the courtroom. One attorney froze, another started flipping through documents like they were trying to find a magic escape hatch. And one, yes, one, reportedly quit on the spot. That is unheard of in a case this high stakes. When an attorney walks away mid-proceeding, it means one thing. They know what's coming is worse than staying. So what exactly terrified them? Well, here's the part they don't want you to notice. The judges didn't just reject Trump's arguments, they expressed open skepticism about how his team has been handling the case at all. That changes the entire landscape. And let's not gloss over this. 29 judges don't unite like this unless they believe something has gone fundamentally wrong. The legal system is built on independence. Each judge rules on their own timeline, their own logic, their own reading of the law. So when that many judges come together in one voice, it signals something deeper, something structural, something that says Trump's tactics aren't just weak, they're threatening the credibility of the process itself. And trust me, judges don't tolerate that. So here's why this matters right now. This ruling forces Trump into a corner he cannot spin, delay, or talk his way out of. The court just slammed the door on the strategy he's depended on for years. And the next steps are going to be even more brutal than what we've already seen. Because if you think this ends with a single ruling, you're not going to believe what comes next.
And here's where things start to unravel in a way that even Trump's closest allies didn't expect. Because once that ruling came down, once the 29 judges made it crystal clear that the games, the delays, the procedural gymnastics were over, the courtroom dynamic shifted instantly. You could almost feel it, even through secondhand reporting. The tone changed from routine hearing to career-ending disaster in about 30 seconds. And the first sign of that shift wasn't even the ruling itself. It was the expression on Trump's lead attorney's face. You know that look when someone realizes their entire plan just evaporated? Yeah, that look. It spread across the defense table like a wave. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Trump's legal defense has never been built around winning on the merits. It's been built around delay. Extend the timeline, drag things out, bury people in motions, hope political winds shift, hope prosecutors lose momentum, hope the public moves on. That's not a strategy designed to win in court. It's a strategy designed to avoid court. But when the judges said, in effect, we're not doing this anymore, they cut off the only path Trump's lawyers knew how to navigate. And when you take away a team's only playbook, you force them to improvise. Trump's lawyers do not improvise well.
Now let's talk about what this ruling actually did, because the surface-level description doesn't capture the magnitude. The judges didn't just reverse a previous decision, they wiped out an entire structure of procedural protections Trump's team had been leaning on. They required full disclosure of key documents that the defense had been aggressively trying to keep sealed. They set strict deadlines for submissions. They rejected multiple delay requests outright. And the most importantly, they made it clear that any future attempts to obstruct or stall would be met with sanctions. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's the judicial equivalent of saying, push this one more time and we break your fingers. And you're probably thinking, okay, harsh ruling, tough day for Trump's lawyers, but is it really unprecedented? Yes, because here's the twist nobody saw coming. The judges used language that goes far beyond a typical ruling. They expressed doubts about the defense's conduct. They flagged behavior that appeared inconsistent with court expectations. They warned that continued obstruction would not be tolerated. When judges start hinting that they're losing trust in a legal team, that is catastrophic. You can't win in a courtroom where the people in robes don't believe you're operating in good faith. And that's before we even get to the internal blowback that followed.
Let's be clear. Here's the part that really matters. According to multiple people familiar with the proceedings, Trump's attorneys began turning on each other almost immediately after the ruling dropped. That's the thing about high-pressure collapses. They don't happen quietly. First you get finger-pointing, then whispered accusations, then senior attorneys blaming junior attorneys, then private counsel blaming political counsel, then political counsel blaming the comms team. And yeah, it's wild, but sources say that's exactly what happened. One attorney reportedly told someone in the hallway, "We warned them this would happen. If that's not a sign of implosion, I don't know what is." But that's not even the surprising part. The part that really shocked observers was the attorney who stood up, gathered their notes, and walked out of the proceeding entirely. Not a recess, not a meeting, not a strategic withdrawal. They simply left. And if you're thinking that sounds exaggerated, it's not. This was witnessed by multiple people. That never happens in a major federal proceeding unless the attorney believes staying would cause irreparable harm to their career. When a lawyer runs from a case like that, it means the risks have become unmanageable. And here's why. Sanctions. Judges don't threaten sanctions lightly, but when they do, every attorney in the room understands that it's personal now. Sanctions can follow someone for years. They can be career-defining. They can lead to bar complaints, disciplinary proceedings, even disbarment. Trump's attorneys knew this ruling put them one step away from a professional nightmare. And again, if that doesn't tell you how dire things have become, remember that most of Trump's legal strategy up to this point has relied on the assumption that judges would tolerate his team's behavior. That assumption just died.
Because what happens next is honestly shocking. Not publicly, but behind closed doors, the defense team reportedly held an emergency meeting that spiraled into shouting. That's not speculation, that's been corroborated by people who are present. And let's be clear, lawyers don't shout during high-stakes cases unless something has gone deeply, fundamentally wrong. One person described the meeting as chaotic, another called it a total breakdown in strategy, another said no one knows what the plan is anymore. When legal analysts call a defense in freefall, this is exactly what they mean. So why does this matter? Why does the implosion of Trump's legal team change the trajectory of the case? It's simple. Because a unified bench destroys the defense's most powerful tools. If you strip away delay, if you strip away procedural shields, if you strip away the ambiguity and stall tactics, you're left with one thing, the factual merits of the case. And Trump's lawyers have never wanted to argue on the merits. Why? Because the evidence they've been trying so hard to keep sealed is, according to multiple analysts, deeply damaging. And here's the part they hope you don't pay attention to. Once that evidence becomes public, and it will, the political fallout will be devastating. This isn't just about courtroom consequences. This is about public opinion. This is about media narrative. This is about allies distancing themselves. This is about opponents gaining ammunition. Political defenses crumble when legal defenses crumble. And after this ruling, both are happening at the same time.
Let's just zoom out for a second because context matters here. Over the last few years, Trump's legal approach has relied almost entirely on the assumption that courts would allow him to stall. But the judicial system has a breaking point, and it looks like this case hit it. When 29 judges act collectively, they're not just resolving a single issue. They're sending a message about what they view as a threat to judicial integrity. And that's important because integrity is the one thing courts protect above all else. You can argue motions, you can push novel interpretations of the law, you can test the limits of procedure, but when a judge feels you're undermining the legitimacy of the court itself, they snap back hard. Okay, but here's the twist nobody expected.
This ruling effectively strips Trump of the image he's projected for years, that of a political figure who can bend the system to his will. When judges unite against you, when they make it clear that you're not going to be allowed to run the clock anymore, that aura of invincibility disappears. And once that aura cracks, everything changes. Donor confidence, political leverage, media framing, base enthusiasm. People who once defended you loudly start whispering instead. And you know Trump, he hates whispers more than shouts. And yes, this gets even more interesting when you consider the timing. The ruling didn't land in a vacuum. It arrived at a moment when Trump's political world was already destabilizing. He's facing challenges on multiple fronts, from polls to party fractures to investigations to public fatigue. A legal collapse like this doesn't just add to the pressure, it compounds it. One crisis becomes a lens through which every other crisis looks bigger. And right now, the lens is massive.
And this is the part that really amplifies the danger for Trump. The ruling forces his legal team to submit evidence under a deadline that they can no longer push back. That means everything they've been trying to keep hidden, emails, directives, communications, draft documents, internal memos, could be on the table. And once those documents hit the courtroom, they hit the public sphere. Trump's lawyers know this, prosecutors know this, the judges definitely know this, and Trump himself, he knows exactly how damaging disclosure can be. It's the one thing he's always feared most. And here's where the next phase begins, because now that the judges have shut down his strategy, the battle shifts to survival. And trust me, that's where things get even stranger. And the strange part begins with what the ruling actually reveals about the judges' mindset. Because when you read through the language they used, yes, the exact phrasing, you see something you almost never see from the federal judiciary. Frustration. Not just disagreement, not just legal critique, actual unmistakable frustration. Judges are trained to remove emotion from their writing. They're trained to speak through structure, precedent, and procedural reasoning. So when they start hinting that they're out of patience, that's a sign things are deteriorating faster than even experts predicted. And you can tell because the ruling goes out of its way to address the repeated pattern of delay, the lack of substantive progress in filings, and the appearance of obstruction. They didn't need to include any of that, but they did, which tells you everything.
What it tells Trump's lawyers is even more straightforward. The usual loopholes are gone. The gray areas are gone. The wiggle room they relied on for years is gone. And what takes its place is a bright, glaring spotlight on every move they make from here on out. One misstep becomes sanctionable. One false claim becomes contempt. One improper filing becomes a disciplinary issue. This is the kind of environment where legal teams implode because they're not ready for precision. Trump's lawyers have never operated in a precision environment. They've operated in a chaos environment, one they cultivated intentionally, and the judges just shut that down entirely. And here's where we get to the part that should honestly terrify Trump's political team even more than his legal team. The optics. Because the story isn't Trump faces another legal challenge. That's old. Everyone has heard that before. The story is 29 federal judges unified to shut down Trump's strategy. That's different. That's unprecedented. That's headline material that even people who tune out politics understand instantly. And yes, this gets even worse for him when you factor in how the media is handling the fallout. Within minutes of the ruling dropping, major outlets started using language like extraordinary rebuke, devastating blow, historic reversal, legal earthquake. You don't get those kinds of descriptors unless the press sees something fundamentally unique happening. And they did.
Now let's talk about why unity among judges is so politically powerful, because people forget the judiciary is Trump's favorite shield. He has spent years claiming that judges are biased, that the system is rigged against him, that courts are treating him unfairly. That rhetoric works when a ruling comes from one judge. It works when a decision is split. It works when there's even the slightest suggestion of ideological disagreement. But when 29 judges say the same thing, when they move as one, when they speak through a unified court order that dismantles your strategy entirely, you can't spin that as bias. You can't frame that as political. You can't blame one judge or two judges or three. You'd have to argue that 29 judges from various backgrounds appointed under different presidents with different political leanings all coordinated a conspiracy against you. And if Trump tries that argument, even his base starts to hesitate.
Okay, but here's the twist nobody expected. The ruling didn't just expose weaknesses in Trump's legal team, it exposed weaknesses in Trump himself. Because for the first time, his reaction wasn't performative confidence or defiance or bravado. According to multiple witnesses, he looked stunned. He didn't lash out immediately. He didn't yell. He didn't go on the offensive. He froze. And that reaction says more about the seriousness of the ruling than any statement the judges wrote. He has always believed he can outrun accountability. That belief took a direct hit the moment the ruling came down.
And the consequences didn't stop there. Behind the scenes, political advisors reportedly began recalculating everything from public messaging to donor strategy to legal funding to campaign timing. You know things are bad when advisors start discussing the political fallout of evidence they haven't even seen yet. Because remember, the judges ordered disclosure. That means documents, communications, internal memos, everything Trump has tried to hide now has a clock ticking over it. And the people around him know how damaging some of those documents could be if they land in the public domain. Now, do they know the specifics? Not fully, but they know enough to worry. And worry is not a word typically associated with Trump's inner circle. But stay with me here because this is where things become almost surreal. The same ruling that wiped out Trump's strategy also forced the prosecution to accelerate its timeline, which means more hearings, more required filings, more deadlines Trump can't push back. It's like a cascade effect. Every piece of the legal process that Trump used to manipulate now moves independently of him. And when you lose control of the timeline, you lose control of the narrative. That's where Trump's political world starts collapsing into his legal world. And that's the last place he wants to be. And here's something else they don't want to talk about publicly. Attorneys connected to Trump are now worried about exposure to professional liability because the judges didn't just criticize Trump's tactics, they criticized how his lawyers executed them. And lawyers don't like having their names attached to judicial rebukes. It affects their careers, it affects their reputations, it affects their future clients. And once that fear sets in, loyalty collapses. Lawyers start protecting themselves, not their client. And if you think I'm exaggerating, remember the attorney who walked out. That was step one. More will follow.
Okay, hold on, because what happens next is even more telling. Within hours of the ruling, conservative legal commentators, people normally sympathetic to Trump, started expressing doubts about the viability of his defense. When your allies start publicly questioning your chances, that sends a shockwave through your base. And Trump's base relies heavily on the perception that he's the one in control, the one dominating, the one breaking the rules and getting away with it. This ruling shattered that narrative. It replaced Trump is unbeatable with Trump just got crushed by the system he thought he controlled. And here's the part that really shifts the ground beneath him. Judges don't take back rulings like this. Once the court signals that delays are over and evidence must be disclosed, they don't reverse course later. They double down, which means Trump is stuck on a legal conveyor belt that's speeding up, not slowing down. And along that belt are deadlines he can't escape, documents he must produce, witnesses he must confront, and judges who have already made it clear they aren't playing along with delay games anymore. Now, I want to highlight why this is more than just a courtroom theater. The political implications are massive because a legal collapse like this feeds directly into political vulnerability. Donors get nervous, allies distance themselves, rivals sense weakness, and in politics, perception becomes reality very quickly. So a narrative of Trump is losing control can snowball fast, especially when there's a real legal basis behind it. So once again, what looks like a legal disaster for Trump becomes a political disaster as well. And the timing could not be worse for him.
But the part that should keep Trump up at night is the fact that once evidence is disclosed, it cannot be undisclosed. It becomes part of the public record. And if the evidence is as damaging as his lawyer's behavior suggests, then this ruling is just the beginning of a much larger collapse. Because once the public sees the details, and they will, the entire political landscape shifts. Allies who were quiet become silent. Supporters who were loud become hesitant. And Trump himself becomes more defensive, more cornered, more isolated. And yes, this gets even more complicated when you factor in the possibility that other cases could use the disclosed evidence. That's the quiet part people haven't fully processed yet. Evidence from one case can trigger movement in another, and once that begins, Trump's legal challenges don't stay isolated. They merge, they feed into each other, they multiply. And that's the worst-case scenario for someone whose entire strategy depends on keeping cases compartmentalized. So here's the bottom line right now. Trump isn't just dealing with a bad ruling. He's dealing with a structural collapse of the strategy he hoped would save him. And if you think the cracks are big now, wait until the next phase hits, because that's where everything escalates.
And now we're at the part where everything becomes unavoidable, because after the panic, after the infighting, after the legal freefall, what Trump faces now isn't speculation or rumor or political theater. It's the cold reality of a judicial system that finally decided to stop playing along. 29 judges standing together is not just a ruling, it's a message that says the delay era is over, the stall tactics are done, and accountability is no longer optional. And Trump knows that. His lawyers know that. His political team definitely knows that. Which is why, behind the scenes, conversations have shifted from how do we fight this to how do we survive this? And survival is going to be harder than ever because everything he's been trying to avoid, documents, communications, testimony, timelines, are now crashing towards him at full speed. The courts aren't giving him room to maneuver. There's no friendly ruling to hide behind. There's no procedural escape hatch left. And once the evidence becomes public, it rewrites the political narrative overnight. That's the part his allies are terrified of. Not just the ruling itself, but the chain reaction that comes after it. The donors who back away, the strategists who second-guess him, the elected officials who decide the cost of defending him is finally higher than the cost of letting him fall. So where does this leave Trump? In a position he has spent his entire career avoiding, cornered, constrained, and forced to confront the legal system on its terms, not his. For the first time, he can't outrun the consequences. He can't overwhelm the process. He can't delay until something breaks in his favor, because the thing that broke was his strategy.
And if today proved anything, it's that once the courts decide the games are over, there's nothing left for him to hide behind. This is only the beginning of the fallout, but the collapse, that already happened.